Everyone who considers Christianity brings heartfelt questions and intellectual objections born out of real-life experiences. They're looking for answers, but even more, they're looking for a safe place to ask their questions. Join me as I meet with a group of people who don't believe in the Christian faith to discuss 6 of the most common objections to Christianity. Welcome to The Reason for God. Welcome to The Reason for God. I'm Tim Keller, Redeemer Presbyterian Church, and you wouldn't be here unless there were plenty of questions, maybe objections that you have that make Christianity for you right now untenable. And Paul, the Apostle Paul in the Bible, also had lots of questions. They weren't the same as ours or yours, but they were very formidable. For example, he was a devout Jew, studied the Old Testament Bible all his life, hears that Christianity means that half the Old Testament's obsolete, all the stuff about sacrifices and things and ceremonies. And so he says, Christianity can't be true. So he had very, very big objections, yet he became a Christian. So what happened to his questions that he was able to do that? Like Paul, we today have all kinds of questions. People have lots of questions about the Bible, and that's what we're talking about tonight. And in fact, this is the question we're going to be discussing. Many people say that the Bible's filled with good things, but they ask, isn't the Bible a myth? And hasn't science disproved Christianity? Many people say that though there's many good things in the Bible, you can't treat it as authoritative because in some cases it's just mistaken. It's either scientifically inaccurate or historically unreliable or culturally regressive. And yet Christianity says you have to believe the Bible, you have to not only believe it, but you have to trust it and take it into you and into your heart, and it changes you. So that's quite a big difference between what most people think about the Bible, what Christianity says about the Bible. So the question is that possible? Let me just ask you to start, how do you feel about the Bible? What do you think about the Bible?
I'm not sure whether people believe in the Bible through rational scholarship or study. For instance, I'm Korean. I grew up going to church. Most Koreans I know grow up going to church, and I feel like a lot of times their belief in the Bible and in Christianity arrives from that cultural pressure. It's unclear to me whether they've really thought it through.
I'm Japanese American. It's probably, I think half the immigrants of Japanese American ancestry or Japanese ancestry in the US are either Methodist or Buddhist. But I would say probably 80 to 90% of them actually go attend those churches or temples for social reasons, which is a big reason. I mean, I actually went to Methodist, it's probably a lot, Presbyterian, Catholic, I don't know what. I went to a whole slew of Christian churches. I remember sticking pictures of Jesus on stuff. And then my dad shifted me actually, or all of us, to a Buddhist temple toward high school, late elementary, because he was actually not a non-believer. He was not Christian, he was actually anti-Christian. And he wanted us to think about our spouses coming from the Buddhist religion. But it was just social, it's a social thing.
My biggest problem is God is an omnipotent being. In fact, the problem of omnipotence, is really tough for me, and sort of logically, philosophically.
That puts him on the hook, doesn't it? If he's omnipotent.
Yeah.
Well, it also means he can do anything. He can create a history or a sort of. He can create fossils. He can create. Create anything, any impression, or he can do anything, basically.
I think it's interesting that there's this opposition between myth and truth. I don't think that necessarily has to be the case. Some myth is maybe something that we all imagine collectively. If I have an idea about something and if we all kind of believe in it, then that's something that maybe could be a mythic tale. But I don't think it's necessarily necessary for it to be factually true in order for it to be important. I wonder if that's not, if the question isn't in itself a trap or a dichotomous setup from the beginning.
I'm a big believer in that the answers you get are shaped by the questions you asked. I think for me, it's really important to be clear on what we mean by particular words, because in the end, we're empowering, particularly I think in the Christian religion, we're empowering words to mean so much.
For me, it says, did Jesus come, die on the cross, or did he not? And for me, that is very important. That's the most important because it holds all these ramifications with it. If he did do that, then that changes everything, as opposed to if he didn't do that.
I think that, to be part of Christianity, part of being part of Christianity is to accept the whole Bible as for what it is. And I think that that's something that I can't support.
I think the essence of the question is asking, do you think the Bible is true or not? Whereas myth is sort of the way we say false. And the way I feel about that is, I just don't think it's a relevant question. I think the Bible is a wonderful text, complex, a lot of things going on. I know some people believe it to be the truth. I myself do not.
I have a question for you though. Like, do you believe in something larger than yourself then, or larger than our immediate material world?
I definitely do. I believe that there are a whole, whatever thing out there that we do not have the capacity to understand. I don't necessarily make that into a human being-esque type person, certainly male, bearded, or whatever manifestation is. I think it's, there's a very sort of scientific way I understand things beyond what I understand.
Actually, I'm curious, and why do you believe that? I mean, Eunice
Why do I believe?
Eunice is right. Plenty of folks don't believe in anything beyond the material. So I'm curious why, you say, I know there is something, and I'm just curious why you know, or how you know.
Well, I don't know I know, but science
sense.
brought me, I would believe, to belief in faith. I believe in faith. Now, what does that mean? Absolutely.
That's interesting.
The highest harmonics of science, you realize that science in of itself is a theory. It's a myth. I mean, it was crazy when my college teacher in chemistry class told me, by the way, this is not real. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like, we don't really know molecules or atoms exist. It's all theory. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I actually think science, in a way, I see it also as a religion, and in of itself should be scrutinized.
Emotionally, I'm drawn to Christianity. It fulfills voids in my life or needs or gaps that I need filled. So in that sense, it does. I think the way I look at the Bible is definitely more scientific. Evolution is very crucial for me, it being able to mesh into the Bible properly, because I definitely believe in evolution. So if the Bible says evolution does not exist, then I feel it loses credibility. So that's definitely critical for me to believe. And I definitely feel like there's a burden of proof on the Bible to make Christianity true.
Science can't give you meaning in life. It can't tell you right and wrong. It can't tell you what to do with your guilt. So there's plenty of things that the Bible claims to have the answers for that science couldn't give you the answer for.
Science is designed only to give us really numbers. I mean, that's primarily what it's designed to do. But if we use the same criteria, science can't tell us what love is, just even between people. It can't give us that.
Totally agree.
Well, I think the I don't know what you call the dichotomy between science and religion, between myth and reality, or myth and truth. I don't know. It seems to me that there's a lot of misunderstanding about it on both sides. They're almost like two kids in a schoolyard, kind of accusing each other, basically, or sort of claiming territory in some sense. And I think, for me, science is a methodology. It's a way of exploring reality. It doesn't necessarily make assumptions or come to a final conclusion about what is reality and what is not.
So, other questions about the Bible and belief in the Bible?
I guess one that I have is there's a lot of miracles that happen in the Bible, but yet I've only been alive for 25 years. I've never seen like a miracle along the what happens in the New Testament.
Mm-hmm. I guess just two things, two ideas. One is that actually, if you read the Bible, you don't actually see miracle every chapter. There are periods of miracles when God's doing big things. So I don't think the Bible teaches that miracles happen all the time. They tend to come in swarms. The only thing I'd say about the miracle is you couldn't say miracles are impossible unless you could disprove the existence of God. See, if there is no God, if there is a God, I should say, then miracles have to be possible. You can't disprove God, and therefore you have to at least philosophically be open to a miracle. But the problem with science is science assumes a natural cause for everything. That's how it does its work. And if it sees something that looks like a miracle, it's never going to declare it a miracle. It's going to say the data isn't all in. And so it by definition, could never see a miracle even if it was there. That's its job. So if there is a God, then there has to be at least the possibility of miracles. So I have to be open to it when I read it in the Bible, I think.
But how does that make it any more true in the sense of the things that actually did happen, whether Jesus sacrificed himself? Because I'm not sure if there's evidence for that.
Oh, you're asking about the evidence? Well, I think let me give you a response, and we'll see what you all think of it. If you go to the places in the New Testament where the Bible describes the life of Jesus, that's the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. That's the best place to start and ask the question, did this really happen? Is this true? Did these things happen? And there actually is. I'll give you a real quick survey of the reasons why you can rely on the historicity of those passages. So for example, the Gospels were written not 100 or 200 years after the events. They were written within the lifetime of the eyewitnesses. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were all written within 30 to 50 years after the events of Jesus' life. And Paul's letters were written 15 to 25 years afterwards. And because of that, you can't just make up wholesale fabrications. You know, 40 years ago I was in college, truth may be told, and I remember college pretty well. So if somebody came along and said, you know, on your college campus this and that happened, and I was there, I would say, no, it didn't. So it's 100 or 200 years later, when everybody's dead, you can just make things up. But Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were written too early just to make things up. Secondly, the eyewitnesses are actually often named in the book. So for example, in Mark chapter 15, there's a place where it says Jesus was on his way to the cross, and a guy came and helped him carry the cross. His name was Simon of Cyrene. And then Mark says Simon of Cyrene is actually the father of Alexander and Rufus, period. Then he goes on, just mentions Alexander and Rufus. And that would be incoherent unless Alexander and Rufus were people that were alive and you could go talk to them. And Richard Bauckham, who's this New Testament scholar, says that when you see a name like that in the gospel narratives, it was like footnotes today. It was a way for the writer to say, this person's still around and you can go talk to him. So you can't look, I don't think, at the gospel narratives as legends that were written a long time ago. They're written as historical documents, and that's part of an answer to your question of, can you rely on them?
When I think about my profession as an attorney, one of the things that, for me at least, signifies like the differences between lawyers and other people is that we're really into words. It's what we do. Whether you write contracts, whether you read a case, whether you argue in front of a court, it's all about precision. And I think people who really believe in the Bible believe that like the words are there for a reason, they're constructed that way for a reason. But for me, it's like, well, the Bible has been translated several times over, and you know, there are different parts that were cobbled together, and I just can't imagine that it remains as precise. And I guess, you know, my training as a lawyer always makes me question the language that I'm reading and the words the way they're constructed. Yeah, to me, if there was nothing bigger than myself, like, it seems so pointless. Yeah. Like, there's so many things I can't explain, so unless I thought there was a bigger system that I couldn't conceive of, I think that would be like really depressing. Like,
but I don't find it is. I mean, it's one of the things I can believe in is that there's nothing larger than, and that's okay. Yeah, I think you can still have faith that tomorrow will, you know, the sun will come up, and then I can be happy, and then
morality.
Morality,
Yeah,
I think you can.
Well, the Christian approach to truth is different.
Right.
So when two people say, well, you have your truth, I have my truth, or you have your morality, I have my morality, Christianity would say, truth is reality. I can't form it. It's there. So for example, if I've got a tree in the middle of the street, truth is that there's a tree in the middle of the street, and I better turn my car to the right or the left. If I say, well, what really matters to me is that, I don't want to feel there's a tree there, or that's not meaningful to me, then the tree will kill you because you'll just go right into the tree. Now, I think most people believe at the physical level that some things are true and some things are false. Whereas I think when it comes to the moral and the spiritual, people say, well, it's up to you to decide what is right or wrong for you. Christianity says there's more cohesion between the physical and the spiritual realm, and says that you do need to forgive, you do need to love, and these things are, if you hate or if you don't forgive, and you do need God, and if you don't have God, then it's like running into a tree, because there's something about your nature that needs these things, and if you don't have it, you're out of accord with your nature. So the Christian approach to truth is somewhat different. It's not you have your claim, we have our claim.
But does it also have these expectations that you can't live up to? I mean, for example, like, I dated, very strict Christians in college, and I obviously didn't have an affiliation to a faith, and they have in my opinion, you're in college, you have this unlivable standard that you can't live up to. So I think it also makes the kids I think it also causes a lot of turmoil for a lot of children, because their parents put this unrealistic pressure on them to live up to this, this code of ethics, this moral, but it also impedes on their life, like living their life.
Touche. It is true that a lot of Christians look at the Bible just as moral truth that we have to live up to. And I know the way I just put it was pretty stark, like, there it is, it's true, you obey it, or else it's like running into a tree. I know that was pretty hard hat. But part of the truth of the Bible is that God forgives, that the whole reason why Jesus comes into the world is not just to kick you into shape. The reason he comes into the world to die, why is that important? It's to forgive you for your sins, so that you're actually saved not because of what you do, but because of what he's done, which on the one hand shows that truth is important, but the heart of the truth is that you're not related to God, this is the Christian gospel, by living a good life and by attaining to something, but by recognizing your weakness, your need, your frailty, and trusting in him. So that attitude you're talking about doesn't actually fit with my understanding of what the message of the Bible is.
I feel like you could find truth in a lot of things. People find truths in different areas of their lives. I find truth in different things than somebody else might find truth. So I think there's truth to the Bible if you believe that there's truth. I spend a lot more time on the subject wrestling with what is truth, and I found my truth to be that people don't need religion to be moral. What I would say to you is it implausible to you that it might not be true? Would all your work, if someday you had to face the fact that all your work was for nothing, would you be able to do so?
So, am I open to the possibility that Christianity isn't true? Right? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Well, the reasons I believe, so just speaking personally, are both rational and you might say existential. That is, there's two reasons why at this point in my life I feel Christianity is true. One is I think about it, I look at the arguments, I think reasonably, and I feel like on the whole the arguments are very strong, and that's my rational side. I could imagine in a group like this having that, some of my arguments that in my head are strong being weakened, yes. Could I be open to you perhaps in here, you're bright people, dismantling some of my arguments? Yes. The existential part, that is a sense of God's presence, a powerful sense of God's presence, which came into my life after I first was convinced that probably Christianity was true. Then I got into it. Then I had these very strong experiences of God's presence. That's not going to go away very quickly.
I'm a composer, and I believe in the world of art, and art is all prefabricated. Someone made it, and it's true for the moment, it's true for your experience. So for something to be real, it doesn't have to be authenticated in some kind of history. So, is it real or is it not? It's more, does it resonate? Does it seem emotionally true? Does it seem spiritually true? And the scientific aspect of whether it's true or false, it doesn't seem relevant to me. Although I'm interested to think about why someone who does believe the Bible needs it to be true as well. That I'm interested in.
let me conclude with an observation. If you were reading Caesar's Gallic Wars, which is a historical document, ancient document, and you had to determine whether or not it actually happened, if it was true, or whether it was legendary, you would be objective, because it wouldn't matter to your life whether it was true or not. It doesn't make a difference. However, when you read the Bible, especially if you read the New Testament and you ask, did Jesus really say these things? Did he do these things? Was he raised from the dead? That, of course, if it's true, has a huge impact on your life. And therefore, nobody's really objective. You can't read something like that knowing its impact and be objective. Now, if Eunice someday becomes a judge, if she finds herself having to sit in judgment on a case in which there's a company involved that she is invested in, and therefore the case going this way or that way would affect her financially, she's going to recuse herself because she says, I'm not objective. The problem is, when we read the Bible, we can't recuse ourselves. And therefore, instead of just saying, well, I don't want to go there, we have to read it as objectively as possible. We really have to check ourselves. We may want it to be true, we may not want it to be true, but we, as much as possible, have to look at the evidence and study it very carefully. And what that means is, in the end, that if we are skeptical, we should be skeptical of our skepticism. This was a great time, and I'm really looking forward to the other discussions.
Thank you.
Thanks.